Hello, I've just started a game of the Korean War. I'm playing the full campaign game. Now it's a new game to me. I haven't played it before. I picked it up some months ago. I was very fortunate because it's a well-respected game and generally goes for quite high prices, but the version I got didn't have a box, so all the other components seem to be present, perfectly functional, but without having a box it wouldn't get picked up on the collector's market, so I was able to get a nice price on it. But anyway, having said that, what the point is that it's a new game to me. I've played the first scenario and the second scenario, which essentially the first scenario is, I think it's the game goes up to 12 turns. That's 12 months of the first year of the war. You have winter months here. And these like an air phase and then 2 action phases or action cycles that you get. So I played the first scenario, which is just sort of the beginning part of the war, and essentially you have it's the North Korean. They're the yellow forces here. They knock out these. What we have is North Korean regiments with assets on armoured assets. So you have regiments, strength 12 versus ROK. Now what's that? Is that Royal something Korean? But anyway, the South Korean indigenous forces that were with strength of 2 regiments getting pummeled by these North Korean units coming down, and it brings you to essentially round about here, the Yalu River and the Pusan. So you reach the Pusan perimeter. Now in my game, the Koreans kind of reached around here and obtained a fairly good victory, a fairly good level of victory. Then the second scenario is when the Americans start bringing their forces. So it's the next, I think it's turns 4 and 5. So you get 2 action cycles each turn, and it includes the, if you wish, the Incheon landing. You're probably going to do that because you want to take back Seoul. You can do amphibious invasions at any of these points. You can also evacuate troops amphibiously from any coastal hex. You can see the Americans have an option. Probably can't see it, but you can actually amphibiously invade various cities along that side, not on this side. So we have the where is it? We have the 38th parallel along here. So this is South Korea, that's North Korea. But anyway, I played that second game, and again the North Koreans won a fairly decent victory. So I obviously haven't quite figured out how to play the UN forces, although one thing that I did notice I hadn't done was it called reconstitution. So I was sort of learning the game, and there's quite a few phases in each turn. The core of it's in the action phases, but then there's various different things that can be done, like breaking down regiments, breaking down divisions into regiments, building up regiments and divisions, then reconstituting United Nations forces, so that's building them back up to strength, amalgamating other forces. I didn't do those things. That may have made it a bit harder for the UN, but I've played 2. I sort of fancied the whole thing, and I've already made a decision, more or less, is that in the whole game you have a very interesting thing called global tension. So global tension, if it reaches level 7, it starts at 0. If it reaches level 7, then the Third World War has started and North Korea is deemed to have won, basically just because they didn't start that war. And that rises up according to rolls on this table here. Now, if you can see, it either rises by 0, 1, or when we get up to here, you're rolling a d10, and normally, and it's from 0 to 9, so normally the highest you get is here. Then you get modifiers depending on certain like interventions from North Korea, such as invading Formosa, Chinese intervention, so forth. So I don't have to worry about those till later, but the point being is you decide which column you roll depending on three things. One is what the UN the rules of engagement is going to be, and that effectively determines how you can use your air forces. You have an off-map as it were here, and the US there's various regions on the map, and you can put air forces in here and then interdict, make movement difficult, and also what else does it do? Something crucial. It takes down the yes, what it can do is you can interdict the supply, and the supply is very important because you place depots on the map. You can have it up to 3 points worth of depots, so one depot versus 3 point worth 3 points, or one worth 2, one worth 1, or 3 worth 1, and then you roll to see how many supply points. You roll to see how many supply points that depot produces, and then you can either save those supply points or spend them for initiative and other commitment. So you can have, if you spend no supply, you have restricted commitment, then you can have limited accelerated or offensive if you can spend 3, 2 or 1 supply. And this will adjust the attack value and the defense value of units within these various ranges of that depot. So if you want to have, you can see from that if you want to go on offensive, you need a lot of supply, and you'll get double attack value, which will give you a nice boost on the combat results table. If you don't have it, then say if you're restricted, everything's going to be half attack and defense, no matter what range it is from a depot. So the UN can decide what their commitment is going to be in terms of the rule of engagement, but then that gives a DV value, is that something value, which adds up to this figure at the top to determine your common destabilization value. Then the other thing is the US mobilization track. So again, that's the same thing. You can decide your level of mobilization, and I believe you can change these from turn to turn, so that you can increase them. You can't. I don't think you can decrease, but I'll have to check that. But so that's basically how quickly you're going to get like replacements and back, and then but that's only as DV sort of between 1 and 10. This adds DV between 1 and 36, so that does go up pretty highly if your rules of engagement is at a high level. But this is most interesting for me right now, is the UN intervention track. So that goes from a DV of 2 all the way up to 24, and this essentially determines how quickly and what reinforcements the UN gets. You can see I have a trail down here. This is all the letters of the alphabet. So we start at A, B, C, D. These are reinforcement bundles available. Some are just air units, some are ground forces. So we have A, B, C, D all the way down here. And that's just a listing of them. But then this is what we're looking at now, is depending on my initial intervention level, and you decide this right at the beginning, in the second term, when the UN comes in to intervene. At the moment it's just South and North Korea, the first game term. So you decide the level, and if, say for example, your intervention level 1, you're only going to get a reinforcement, so you're going to have to escalate, and you can escalate as the game goes on to bring in more reinforcements. So on game turn 2, if you start at intervention level 2, you'll get reinforcements A, B and C and D on 3. Now, so you can go up slowly, but if you only get Z if you go all the way up to intervention level 6. Now, intervention level 6 is worth 24 destabilization values. So if you're adding that to, maybe a score I don't know, so let's say 6 from here and 4 from here, then you're getting 34, so you're rolling on this column here, and each turn this track is going to be going up by 1 point, sort of 50% of the time. But you can see as these get higher, then you're going up to higher columns, and you're either guaranteed a shift every turn, or it could jump 2 or even 3 spaces at a go. Now, because you've only got 12 months, 12 turns in the game, but this goes up to 7, obviously if you're going up 1 every month after the first month, so it would be 11, that would, if you go up 1 every month, that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So by game turn 8, you would guarantee Third World War starting. You would have lost. So you have to kind of time it. And what I've decided is that I'm going to normally players would probably cautiously escalate according to more or less the historical kind of commitment levels, give or take a little bit. But I've decided what I'm going to do is ramp it up pretty quickly. So it's going to force me, it's going to mean that yes, so essentially what it means is I don't want to miss any reinforcements. So I'm going to be going, so essentially on game turn 2, I will go to start at level 2. On game turn 3, I'll go up to 3 to make sure I can get the maximum reinforcements available, and which means that by game turn 8, I'm going to be at level 6, which is the highest intervention level. So I'm just going to do it that way to sort of see that if the UN max out as much as they can, at least in terms of intervention, not necessarily in terms of mobilization, you know, replacements and air commitment, or rules of engagement, but the point being that it's going to be a race against time, so they're going to get a lot of forces, more than they might do in certain certain choices, player choices, but you know, they're going to be sort of playing close to the wire in terms of World War III. And I'm doing that really just to push me to see, maybe to get a shorter game, so it doesn't sort of drag on too long for me, and B, just to see what we can do if we consider political scenario where you had hawks in control in the UN, and just saying we got to nip this in the bud, we've got to go all in, we've got to put all our chips on the table, no matter, you know, if we don't do it now, the futures won't be worth it. And so sort of dicing with World War III. So that's my preamble of what this one will be about. Now you see on the first game turn, the 38th parallel is here. Essentially, this is the dead pile of ROK regiments. So we had one here, this one pushed down to there. This one is pushed across the river, was blocked by him. This one's moving up there. That one stayed where it is because this is quite heavy terrain to get through. Not so much the North Koreans move more easily through some of the heavy terrain. For example, the UN spend 6 in a mountain, the North Koreans spend 3. The UN spend 4 in that rough terrain. You just saw the North Koreans spend 3 again. But still, he's kind of blocking down there, so the North Koreans will have to take the slow route or take him out. Then I just essentially moved up some South Koreans from down this side, coming up here, and then another one managed to reinforce into Seoul. That's Seoul there. We have Incheon here. And what these red things indicate is these are sort of victory points for the North Koreans. If they can capture Incheon, Seoul, this city here, 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 and Busan. So you can see to that chain all the way down to Busan. That's an automatic victory for them. Likewise, if the UNs take Seoul, that's just to remind me it's Seoul without putting it on top, they have to take 8 of these 10 cities. So these are all coastal cities. There's 2 there. One's actually a production city, one's a coastal port. Where are we? Got 2 there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I think I missed one there, 10. So if the UN takes those 8 of those 10, then they get an automatic victory. Otherwise it's going to be on points at the end of the game, unless of course World War III is triggered before we reach the end of the year. I say the end of the year, but it actually goes from June 1950 to May 1951. So that's what we're looking at. I think what it means is that the UN's going to be fairly aggressive, and they're going to have to launch amphibious invasions up here, because it will be a long slog to get all the way up to here, for example, just inland. And taking these 2, you can see hiding behind the mountains here, it kind of seems to mean the UN, they either have to take all those coastal ones, including here and Seoul, and forget about those, or maybe they would take these and forget about those 2, something like that. Or, forget about this side. I think the 8 out of 10 really means that those 2 are going to be hard to get, and it seems sensible to concentrate that, unless somehow you get a breakout up here in the mainland. So that's where we're sitting, and we're ready to start turn 2. Now this game has got great play arrays. You have, like I said, there's lots of phases. This is a game turn track. So game turn 1 is truncated, so essentially you only get 1 action phase, and it's quite short. And game turn 2 has all of these. The good thing about this track is that it tells you certain turn specific things. So as you go through checking off the phases, it reminds you of certain game turn specific events that do or don't happen on those turns. So that's very helpful. You've also got North Korean tables and UN specific tables as well. I've got tables. These tables around the edge are all duplicated on these player aids. Obviously the tracks aren't. You have to use those. So when you play the just the scenarios, you don't use the northern map, which starts here. You can see it's sort of a dog leg that goes off here. So scenarios are just for the southern map, which does include part of North Korea. So then you get, like, this part is added on an insert that you can plonk down wherever's handy for you, and you don't actually use these destabilization levels and the tension and so forth in the basic games, as it were, the basic game scenarios. And the advanced game is essentially just the whole game, including this destabilization and communist intervention and so forth. So it's going to be quite a trip for me, my first full game of this ever, and I think what I'll do is maybe come back in at the end of every turn or at a certain point of interest in the turn, just to say what's going on.